baby, listen to me speak, yeah. No matter what, just let it go.
Oh my god, it's Boston Jim. I'm gonna introduce this guy, the professor here. Dude smell like clam chowder. And then Persuade gonna come in. He gonna talk about that technical stuff. Look at him. He's all touching his skin like that. Why do I feel aroused? This is weird. This guy's a video game guy. Look at him holding that vial of green stuff. Look like gonorrhea in a motherfucking tube, guy. Look at you, dude, you weirdo. Alright, look at this. The scale hardened in way too much shit. How the fuck am I supposed to read all that? How is there anyone who can read all that? What am I, a donut here? You got scales shedding. There's nothing that I can tell. There's a bubble. Gardner's gonna be fucking pissed. Holy shit. You see that little backpack? It was a blue one. Now he's decoding, which none of you fucking bozos do in my rank matches. Look at that. That's a rescue where there's no terror shock. He gets hit fucking bad. Oh, look at this Acrobat. He's gonna be fucking mad. Acrobat can't even decode a fucking gate. This guy can do it and hit you back at the same time. Holy shit. It's like getting pregnant but having twins. Anyway, Persuade's here. Hey, what's going on, guys? Sorry about that. Boston Jim, he's, Boston Jim. Let's talk about some of this stuff with the new Lucino individual who is now going to be the Survivor Professor. We got scale hardened, essentially. He can block a normal attack in 1 second. If he fails, he can do it again in 8 seconds. And if he doesn't fail, it pretty much knocks back the hunter and temporarily leaves them immobile for 4 seconds, which is crazy to me. And of course, if he fails both, it takes 60 seconds. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth with some of this, but I really wanted to slow the video down so we could break these skills down. The one thing that I did agree with Boston Jim there is that there's a lot of stuff with very little time to talk about it. So that's scale hardening, and this is going to switch over eventually to the next skill. But this is really going to benefit survivors with green ping. That's what's going to happen. It's going to really benefit them. Scale shedding, so pretty much the professor, he can shed himself. He can shed a scale on the spot, and the scales can be advanced in 3 fixed positions. Survivors will pick them up and obtain 1 charge. Hunters will be knocked back for 1.78 seconds upon normal attacking a survivor with hardened scales. And they can pick up another scale in 120 seconds. So this is really going to be interesting for competitive gameplay. The ability to put a scale down and somebody now has a scale that they can use when somebody normal attacks. It's going to be very interesting how that's utilized from other players. There's going to be a certain level of harassment that this guy can bring, especially with his first ability. I think that for green ping players who have been playing for a long time, this is going to be a pretty solid character for them, especially as they continue practicing and getting better at timing that 1 second. Then you got the scaled skin, so pretty much they can block half the damage. The scales on the body are a symbol of evolution. The professor's unhardened scales can block no more than half the damage from a hunter's normal attack. Damage from the photographer's camera world merging with reality and the breaking wheel inflicting pierce cannot be blocked. So that makes sense. So that's that little blue backpack there. That's very interesting. I'm interested more into that skill and learning more about it. I didn't realize that can block some damage and how that works. Toxicity limit. This is my fucking tolerance of dealing with U.S. chat when watching COA finals, but that's a different story. The poison used by the professor, shed skin, pretty much reduced by 10% decoding for up to 30 seconds. So there is going to be a consequence to using this character's ability with using these scales, which is how all survivors should be. There should always be a consequence. And the eerie aura coming from the scale affects hunters' attacks. Hunters within 5.1 meters of the professor will take 0.3 seconds longer to complete a normal attack. It's going to be interesting to see how significant this is. It doesn't seem like it is a lot, but that 0.3 seconds can make a very big difference in between a survivor getting somewhere else. So let's get into the discussion of this character. There's actually, the video was very weird. If you guys look very close and see the scaled skin, I didn't even know that was a thing. I actually didn't realize it until I was making this video, and it goes by so quickly in the video that you barely even see it. Like, it's less than 2 seconds on the video, I think. So anyway, so we see the scale hardening in the top left-hand corner. I think that's going to really be an important point, because what's going to happen with this ability is that if the survivor base get really good at using this, then a lot of hunters are going to struggle with this. But if hunters can learn how to bait this out, this may not be as big of a factor as what some players make it out to be. So my honest articulation of this skill is that it's going to really depend on what the player base of the survivors are capable of doing versus what the hunters are capable of doing. Historically speaking, hunters would turn around sideways and swing to have a character bait this out. So that's very important to know when using this skill, is that over time, will hunters get better at trying to prevent this skill from really activating. Remember, it's a real tight window. We're talking 1 second. And all of the people with yellow ping and red ping, they're going to be at a significant disadvantage even being able to utilize this character, which is going to be really unfortunate, because when we see a lot of high-tier gameplay, and especially those who play and produce their videos on YouTube, a lot of them have green ping, and that's going to be very frustrating for people with bad ping, because you're not going to have the same reaction time in order to activate this skill. So I think this is going to be a really, really good skill, but the question is will hunters be better at countering this and provoking survivors to use it prematurely? Think of perfumer using perfumes. Over time, hunters would turn sideways and swing to really bait that perfumer to utilize the perfume, and we have seen how effective that strategy has been. And now you're talking about that 1 second window that might really be able to help. You're talking scale shedding as well. The question is what is the cooldown time going to be? This only says the professor can inject himself with poison to shed a scale on the spot, and scales can be shed in advance at 3 fixed positions. Survivors will automatically pick up the scales when passing through and obtain 1 charge of scale hardening. Hunters will be knocked back for 1.78 seconds upon normal attack in a survivor. With hardened scales, survivors cannot pick up another scale within 120 seconds after a scale expires. So the question is, when it says scale expires, does the scale last indefinitely, or what is the expiration date on these scales? When you pick one up, do you only have a certain window of activating them? I'd really like to know that. Can you just put scales on the map? How long do the scales on the map last for? And if somebody picks them up, how long does the scale stay in your inventory for until you can actually activate it? Those are 2 very important points, because based on those points, it's going to really tell you what survivors should be doing with this character. Is it going to be something like a pseudo priestess where you're running around and instead of putting portals, you're putting a scale? And I think that really what's going to activate here is Professor is going to depend on a spawn point. If you spawn on Red Church and you're in the middle of Red Church on the original spawn, you can drop a scale and leave, because you know that it's going to be a major route. If you're in Sacred Heart Hospital, you can put it upstairs knowing that it's going to be a major route depending on your spawn point. So those questions are really going to make me wonder, is Professor going to be significantly more difficult dealing with based on the spawn point of the map, especially smaller maps where it's easier to run into each other? So those are some of the questions that I have when analyzing this. You have scaled skin, and this is the ability that I was speaking about earlier, that it barely popped up. You could see it in the match, but it barely popped up. And this is that the scales on his back are a symbol of evolution. The professor's unhardened scales can block up more than half the damage from a hunter's normal attack. Damage from the photographer's blah, blah, blah. The question is how the hell does this work? The scales on his body are a symbol of evolution. The professor's unhardened scales can block no more than half the damage from a hunter's normal attack. So is that at all times? Is there a cooldown? I'm confused on that, because we see the first skill as scale hardening, where you use the ability and you're immune to damage and you can immobilize a hunter for up to 4 seconds, right? But this says for scaled skin, the scales on his body are a symbol of evolution. The professor's unhardened scales can block no more than half the damage from a hunter's normal attack. It says no more than half. I'm interested to see how this will work. Toxicity limit, the poison, blah, blah, blah. The professor's decoding speed is reduced by 10% for 30 seconds after shedding the scale. which means that the survivor needs to be careful with just shedding all of his scales right away. Or maybe that will be a strategy, because then you only got to deal with the decoding issue in the beginning. But then the problem is how long does it last on the map, and how long does it last for a survivor picking it up? And then you have evil scale. The area aurora from the scale affects hunters' attacks. Hunters within 5.1 meters of the professor will take 0.3 seconds to longer to complete a normal attack. So that's going to be interesting in terms of trying to go in for the rescue. And when a hunter swings, if a hunter swings and you absorb a body hit, the question is what is the scaled skin aspect? I'm still very confused on this. The scales on his body are a symbol of evolution. The professor's unhardened scales block no more than half the damage from a hunter's normal attack. So I'm just very interested in how this is all going to work out. And again, this is going to be, I think this is going to be an ebb and flow sort of character. I think if this character's abilities stay the same, first of all, I'm not really sure if the hunter is going to be immobilized for 4 seconds with the scale hardening. Right? If you activate it in time, all right, what is it? Rendered temporarily immobile for 4 seconds upon hitting the professor. I think 4 seconds is going to be too excessive. Even if you have impeccable ability to use this and time it perfectly, this is going to, I think it's going to be too much. I think we're going to see a nerf to that eventually. I can't imagine that staying at 4 seconds. That's just in my heart. And what I hope is that the devs don't do that shitty thing where they release a character and then they decide to nerf him after the first week when everybody buys that. I'm calling that now. That better not happen, because this character needs to come into the test server. I still think 4 seconds is way too much. You're pretty much just saying, coordinator, go fuck yourself. This ability, I know it's a little different. We shouldn't compare the two, because one is an auto hit. Well, as long as they don't dodge it. This requires impeccable time. But a 4-second immobilization, regardless of how difficult it is to land this. I mean, even if you have a hunter that turns sideways and swings and they're trying to bait this, you're still wasting the hunter's time. What's also interesting is when a survivor decides to activate this and then throw a pallet down. If you activate this ability and throw a pallet down, you're automatically going to be able to throw that pallet down regardless if the hunter hits you. I mean, is there a wind-up time in terms of activating this ability, or is it something that's instant? These questions, they got to be really careful with this, because there is a lot of danger to this character. And I typically try not being hyperbolic, but I mean, this is going to be another version of Acrobat where there's a lot of versatility with him. You're going to have the kiting potential. You're going to have the only difference, obviously, is that there's no real decode and buff to this character that you can get with Acrobat. Well, rather Acrobat. What I mean by that, not a decode and buff, but you get rewarded for doing 150% decoding. So other than decoding, this character might have rescue potential, could have harassing potential, has utility potential. That's exactly what Priestess does with utility. So I'm very interested to see how this character is going to work out with all of their unit. I pretty much see, if you don't like the decode, this is your character. You have utility, you have kiting potential, you have harassing ability. I mean, I don't know how I feel. Is it too much? On that note, I want to see your opinions, boo-boos. Make sure you post them down below. I love you guys. Take care now. Bye-bye.